Welcome to the chalkboard, my fellow football nerds, for episode number 125 of Chalk Talk. I'm your host, Shane Haff, and you can follow me on Twitter and YouTube at Shane Haff NFL. I'm joined today by the best co-host in the game. You've heard him on the Tough Cover radio show. It is Mark Henry Jr. Go give him a follow on Twitter at @MarkHenryJr_. Mark, how are you doing tonight?
I'm doing well. I want to apologize to the Chalk Talk Army out there for my lackluster audio and video here. We got some technological difficulties, but we're working through it. Hopefully, it's not too bad. But yeah, Eagles are 4-0. Life can't be too bad.
Yeah, our Mark's laptop's fried. Fortunately, those of you listening on audio platforms later, our wonderful executive producer will do his best to fix that audio. That's me, by the way. Also a note for those of you that are listening later, those of you that are watching live already know this, but we're doing this on Monday night. I had some scheduling difficulties this week, so we won't be talking about Monday Night Football. That game is about to kick off as we're recording. So no Giants Seahawks talk on this podcast. Sorry if you are a Seahawk or Giant fan, but that's how it breaks sometimes.
Spoiler alert, Seahawks win. That's a fun one I can throw there because if I'm wrong, you can make fun of me. You can clip this out.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's go ahead and dive into it. We'll start, as we always do, with the Philadelphia Eagles. Victory over the Washington Commanders, 34-31 in overtime. Now, last year, Washington came into Philadelphia and they beat the Eagles to hand them their first loss of the year. And this game felt like that at the start. Long scoring drives, ball control. All of a sudden, Washington's up by 10 points, and it's getting close to halftime. The Eagles are able to get a field goal, cut it to 7 at the half, and then in the second half, the Eagles really kind of took control of the game offensively. And then all of a sudden, as you're starting to feel good about it, the defense falls apart and gives up 2 fourth-quarter touchdowns. Fortunately, they get a 3-and-out in overtime, and the Eagles win the game. Mark, what were your thoughts as you're watching this game?
Not positive. They were negative thoughts. Yeah. I think you can leave the offense to talk about later. And honestly, I think the offense is the last thing to be concerned about coming out of that game. Man, I am shocked at how bad the defense was in that game. I've made no bones about how low I am on the Commanders. And I'm not walking out of this game like a lot of people are saying, whoa, the Commanders are better than people think, and they gave us a hard game, and they played us hard. I think that game was close because we allowed it to be, and that game should never have been as close as it was, and the Eagles were the reason. Eagles playing down instead of the Commanders playing up on offense was the reason for that game to go the way that it did. I go back and forth on if I want to push the panic button on the defense, on if I want to say, like, I am really concerned about this from a long-term perspective, or if it's something where, they seem to have a good game plan against us defensively in terms of their offense against our defense. I will say, and this is the same stuff we complained about with Gannon. So, I think it's just going to be whoever the defensive coordinator is. And I think Jonathan Gannon deserves some apologies, as we've talked about. But I would like to see, our whole philosophy defensively is based on the defensive line getting to the quarterback. If the offense going against us decides, let's do 2-step and 3-step drops to combat that and to make sure that, that's not how they beat us, then maybe let's move the corners up. Maybe let's be a little bit more aggressive with how we play in the secondary. Because if it's clear that the reason that we're dropping the corners back is to limit explosive plays and because we trust the defensive line to get after it, if they're doing 2-step and 3-step drops, that already limits explosive plays. So if that's the case and they're doing that, then come up and cheat a little bit in terms of the corners. I was really disappointed in the corner play from pretty much everybody involved in this game from the Eagles.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And honestly, I think the pass rush, it started slow. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but the pass rush was pretty good. The Eagles had 4 different pass rushers generate at least 6 pressures. Josh Sweat with 9, Hassan Reddick 7, Brandon Graham and Jalen Carter each had 6, Fletcher Cox had 4. I really didn't add. This isn't to not to take away from the atrociousness that was the Eagles secondary, but I thought the Commanders had a good plan. I thought Sam Howell played really well. He finishes 29 of 41 for 290 yards and a touchdown. He ran for 40 yards. He broke contain a few times. He directs a game-tying drive in the final minute 43. I thought the issues that have been present for the Eagles all year were present in this game. They have trouble with bunches. They have trouble with motion, pre-snap motion that changes the passing strength. Those are the 2 weaknesses in this defense that you just smash that button if you're an opposing offensive coordinator. And they've got to figure something out. Now, Terrell Edmonds is a total liability in coverage. Hopefully you get Justin Evans back. You get Sidney Brown back. I think you could make an argument to put Sidney Brown in the slot some more and get Josh Jobe off the field. Not that I think Josh Jobe's been awful. I said on Twitter that he's struggled, and people were like, he hasn't been that bad, or other people like he should be on the practice squad. I'm like, that's not what I said. He's struggled. It's expected, but he hasn't stepped into that role. I would like to get Bradbury back to the outside and try Sidney Brown in the slot, but you got to get those guys healthy, and that's a huge thing right now that's really hamstringing this defense, I feel like.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. You also need Darius Slay to play like a CB1 and to be better. I know people don't like hearing that, but I think that's true. And yeah, I think the secondary, I think a lot of it is scheme based though. And we can talk about Jobe, we can talk about Sidney Brown, we can talk about who we want to play where. But when you're lining guys up as far as off the line of the scrimmage as they do, I'm fine with it in general. But when the offense adjusts, you also have to adjust. That's the whole point of this. And it's pretty crazy to see the one team that our defense did dominate, and we're going to talk about all the games, obviously, not to get away from this game. The one team that our defense did dominate almost start to finish is the team that's 3-0 in the games they haven't played us. The Tampa Bay Bucks are sitting there at 3-1. Their offense has been mostly great outside of the games they played us. We dominated them. So it's hard for me to know what our defense is after the last 2 weeks, when 2 weeks ago against Tampa, who I don't think is great. I don't even know if they're a good offense, but I don't think they're terrible beyond belief. And that Tampa game, they shut down that Tampa offense. This Washington game, one of the worst defensive performances in recent memory for the Eagles. So it's hard to get too high off the one game or too low off the other. I'm sure it's somewhere in the middle. And that's this is a big time week coming up here in the Rams game for the Eagles defense to kind of show what they're made of. And depending on injuries, they might have Puka Nacua and Tutu Atwell, who have been really good. Kyron Williams, who's been really good out of the backfield as a weapon in the passing game as well. And maybe Cooper Kupp. And I know this isn't a preview pod, but the Rams are the next opponent. And, there's a lot of reasons to be concerned about that game in terms of the defensive side of the ball. And I think the last time people were this concerned about the defensive side of the ball was after week 2, because they allowed that game to get close with Minnesota. And I think a lot of that was on the defense. And they responded with that Tampa game. How, I guess it's a lot of this is going to come down to how they respond against now a banged up Matthew Stafford and a Rams team that is still weak on the offensive line. So you hope that defensive line can be an X factor in that game.
Yeah, absolutely. Here's a cool stat I'll throw at you. I got from NFL Research. Just the Eagles haven't played their A game, and the Eagles were down 10 in this game. The thing I always come back to, this team never lets things snowball. They never are reeling. They're always calm, collected. I think they reflect the leadership of Jalen Hurts, who, according to NFL Research, has won each of the last 5 regular season starts in which his team trailed by 10 or more points. They're never out of a game. They're never out of a game. It doesn't matter how it's going. You trust that somehow they're going to get back into it. And we said at the start of the year, this schedule gets brutal. You know, the Dolphins into the Bills, into the Chiefs, into the 49ers and the Cowboys twice. Like, it is a brutal November, December stretch. And we said they get a easy on-ramp. You slowly ramp up 6 really winnable games before that stretch starts. The Eagles are stacking wins like we said they needed to. There's issues that are obvious. And although they've stacked the wins, they're running out of time to work those issues out. I was trying to think today, would I feel better if the Eagles were 3-1, having blown out 3 teams and lost to the Cardinals like the Dallas Cowboys have? Or would I feel better at 4-0 with some shaky wins? Like, you haven't felt great about a lot of the wins, but they are wins. And I mean, ultimately you want the wins, but you would like to see a little more dominance. At the end of the day, they are stacking wins, though, and that's what September, October football is about, stacking wins and staying healthy.
Yeah, it's not the BCS. I don't care about style points. I'd rather be 4-0 than be 3-1 with a a really impressive 3 wins for sure, especially with the upcoming schedule. All of that for sure. I think the reason that I feel that way, and I might not feel that way if we were some unproven team. Like, maybe last year I would have answered differently, but this is a team that went 15-2, 14 last year, and went to the Super Bowl in dominating fashion and went toe to toe with Patrick Mahomes in the Super Bowl. And this is a guy in Jalen Hurts who has won now 21 of his last 22 regular season starts, and that number was 17 of 18 before this year. So if I didn't feel so good about the roster and so good about the quarterback and so good about the leadership in general about the team, then maybe I'd get a little bit more concerned. But everything I just said about the defense, I think there are just an absolute ton of positive takeaways to have from the offense. And I know that you were getting into it online a little bit about Jalen Hurts. And I don't disagree with the criticism you made about him kind of giving himself up a little bit easier this year. And I agree with kind of your comeback against the people saying that specific play, he's being safe. That corner is not going to hurt him. I totally agree with you. I think he has been a little bit too safe on some of those. In my opinion, I wouldn't say let's go ahead and have him be more aggressive on those. I would just eliminate them. Like, I think the quarterback runs are never. I'm not a big fan of the quarterback runs. I think Jalen's legs are best used when it's improvisational. I've always said that, when it's third down, when it's second down, and you need those yards. That's how I like Jalen's legs to be used. I don't want to go to that well too many times, especially when our running game with our running back is just so good anyway.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe you call 1 or 2 a game to keep the defense honest, really, more than anything else. But I don't think the answer is, let's continue doing those and have him run through people. I think it's probably just don't call those. But regardless of that, I got sidetracked there. A good comment. I think we can go undefeated through October if we continue to improve each week. I said going into week 2, if they won week 2, they would be 6-0. So I still feel good about that, even though I think this week 5 coming up against the Rams is our toughest test of the year. I do think week 6 against Zach Wilson, I don't care how Zach Wilson looked on Sunday Night Football. The Eagles are beating Zach Wilson. I don't see any scenario they lose that game. Famous last words. But this week 5 will be our toughest test. I do think the Eagles start the season 6-0. To be quite honest, if you, they're a 4.5 point favorite, so Vegas agrees as well. But Jalen Hurts, outside of that conversation, I got sidetracked on there. Jalen Hurts played fantastic in this game. I thought that especially with his arm, I thought in terms of his passing in this game, I thought he was elite. I thought it was his best game of the year. I thought he was the reason they won this game, beyond the shadow of a doubt. A.J. Brown was awesome. Devontae had an incredible catch. I think DeAndre Swift, I know that the stats maybe weren't as glamorous for DeAndre Swift, but I was still like, he had a couple 5-yard runs that I was like, wow, like that should have been -1 yard, -2 yards, and he turned it into a positive play, which is just as valuable as a 10-yard run sometimes. So I thought everyone on offense pretty much played well. I will say, tough game for Jordan Mailata.
Mm. I didn't think it was as bad as some people did. To be honest, it wasn't his best game. He had a few moments, and I think the biggest thing is a few of his moments were they were really bad. They were very noticeably bad, and I think that's what gets people. But I mean, if you go look at his charting for the game, he had 45 pass blocking snaps. He allowed 4 pressures, 3 hurries, and a hit. It's not the worst. Like
That's the game, yeah.
Yeah, but that one sack he allowed, that one he just got blown by. It was a very bad look for him.
And he had a penalty as well, right?
Yeah.
I think he had a pretty bad penalty there that cost us a bit. So, yeah, just a couple loud moments. You're right. I mean, that's like the whole thing about being an offensive lineman. You can play 58 snaps. You have one really bad snap where you allow pressure and one penalty, and that's what I'm going to remember from the game. But it did feel like Chase Young was, a constant factor in this game, whether it be in the run game, whether it be in the pass game. I didn't think Mailata had his best game. I didn't think Lane had his best game.
Yeah.
To be quite honest, on the other side. And Washington's defensive line did a lot better than I would have hoped. Cam Jurgens getting hurt, I think, hurt a lot. Sua Opeta didn't look up to snuff, in my opinion, on the offensive line. But taking all of that aside, I think, negative. You look at, obviously, he didn't play a perfect game. Jalen Hurts showed why he's a top 5 quarterback in this game. And he's actually still like 3rd in MVP odds.
Yeah. Yeah, it was a good game for him. Hopefully they can continue that. I mean, it is the best offensive performance of the year, despite still some shakiness and despite settling for some field goals where you'd like touchdowns. They really moved the ball well. So, all right. Any other final thoughts on the Eagles game before we move on to the other Sunday games or the Thursday game? We'll go to Thursday first, but
we'd be remiss without mentioning that I think Jimmy Kempski talked about it. That reminds me. I want to talk about that. The Devontae Smith. Well, I guess I'm during the lead here. Jake Elliott, is he the greatest kicker in Eagles history? Has he surpassed David Akers? David Akers wasn't on a Super Bowl team. Jake Elliott was. He made some big kicks in that Super Bowl. He went to another Super Bowl. Now this year, he's hit multiple huge clutch kicks, especially this one. He obviously had the one in the Super Bowl year, the Carson Wentz game check famous field goal. I was not nervous when Jake Elliott stepped up to kick that 54-yarder at all. As soon as Devontae Smith caught that ball, I was like, oh, okay, there we go. We're good. We're going to make this field goal. I was more nervous when he kicked the 36-yarder in the second quarter than when he kicked a 54-yarder to win the game. Jake Elliott's got ice running through his veins. I think he's the best Eagles kicker of my lifetime, at least.
Yeah, when they walked Elliott out for the 54-yard field goal, I was already getting my stuff set up for the post-game show because I knew it was over. And what's funny, you go back to his rookie year, obviously he hits the 61-yarder in his first game in the NFL, and then he was bad after that, to the point, like there was an audio clip of Jason Peters telling him when he was going out to kick a field goal, don't you miss this kick. Like, and ever since then, which maybe that's it. Maybe Jason Peters just needs to spook any kicker, scare him straight. But yeah, Jake Elliott, in my opinion, if you were assigning an MVP award right now for the Eagles, it goes to Jake Elliott.
It might.
They legitimately might be 1-3 without Jake Elliott.
He has been so good, and in that game, I mean, that kick to finish the game like that is just, that's ice in your veins. And I'd be remiss to not mention the tweet that I screen grabbed of Jimmy Kempski's thread that I'm getting constant notifications for now. It's so funny, like what takes off on Twitter and then what gets like 3 likes. But Devontae Smith calls Jake Elliott Chicken Little. And he goes on this whole, back and forth with the reporter explaining why he calls him Chicken Little. He goes, have you ever seen the movie? Dude looks like Chicken Little. And then the next tweet, Jake Elliott on nickname, not a fan. And if you watch the clip, it's even funnier than that. But it's just like, yeah, he's never called me that to my face. I don't like that. Like, it's so funny.
What makes it even funnier is when you realize it's Devonta Smith, who's literally Jake Elliott's size.
Yeah.
Calling him Chicken Little.
That's great. By the way, Devonta Smith, not to get sidetracked, because Jake Elliott was the only thing I wanted to talk about before getting out of this game. Not that he had his best game or anything, Smith, statistically, but oh my God, the fact that he is just able to go up and get balls the way that he is, that was not, and I say this every time he does this, I feel like on this show, that was not something we factored in when we were talking about him as a top 10 prospect in the draft and a Heisman winner. Like, he wasn't doing that. He was, I mean, sometimes he would get contested catches, not like that. Not like jumping up for 50-50 balls and being able to be the highest jumper and coming down with it. Like, he has just developed and he's become way more of even like a deep threat than I would have expected in the NFL. Like, he is, and obviously it goes without saying, he's one of the best route runners in the sport. He's one of the best separation creators in the sport. You know, great in intermediate routes, great in quick routes, great at everything that got him a Heisman, and everything that didn't get him a Heisman, he's become great at. Like, he is, to me, a top 10 receiver without question. And every week watching him, I just walk away more impressed.
Yeah, he's very impressive. And like you said, he was not a contested catch guy coming out, and he's pretty much turned into that over the last couple of years. So maybe A.J. Brown's teaching him a thing or two there.
Yeah, that's true.
By
the way, I do want to also mention I was upset with A.J. Brown for the taunting during the game, because I did feel like he was. I generally don't don't care about that stuff at all, but I did feel like he was legitimately bullying that Washington corner for the entire game. He had 8 catches for 180 yards and 2 touchdowns or whatever he had, and he kept rubbing it in his face and kept putting his fingers and hands right in the guy's helmet and right in the guy's face and stuff. And I was like, dude, you're killing him. You're making the point. He can't cover you, dude.
Stop. He's already dead.
Yeah, exactly. So I did get frustrated when the taunting penalty happened. But what I will say was how he handled it in the post game, I was incredibly impressed by. He was super contrite about it. Said Jalen yelled at him. Said, he's a vet. He's got to be better and all that stuff. Do I think A.J. Brown will get into it with a corner in the next 3 weeks? Yeah, probably. But I did think that I was impressed by him, coming out and owning it.
Yeah. All right. I got a comment and a donation coming in here from Clutch City 71 on YouTube. Salute to you guys. Love the work you guys do. Thank you very much. Really appreciate that. Thanks for tuning into the show here. Maybe we'll leave that one up here for a minute. As we roll on to our Thursday night game, which was the Detroit Lions at the Green Bay Packers. Detroit dominated this game in the first half, had a 27-3 lead at halftime. They outgained the Packers 284 yards to 21 yards. Detroit got after Jordan Love without blitzing. They only called 1 blitz on the night, but they recorded 5 sacks. Aiden Hutchinson had career highs in both QB pressures with 8 and pressure rate at 21.1%. And then Detroit dominated the trenches on offense as well. It wasn't sexy. David Montgomery had 121 yards, but it took him 32 carries. He had 3 touchdowns, but Detroit held the ball for almost 38 minutes in this game. Green Bay continues to start games slow. Jordan Love was 1 for 7 on his first 7 passing attempts with 9 yards and an interception. Somebody needs to tell the Green Bay Packers there's 2 halves to a football game, and you start playing in the first half, because it's the second week in a row that it's the third week in a row they've done that. Just 3 weeks ago, they were able to climb out of the hole.
Yeah, this is one of those games where now I have to kind of look here and say, were you fully wrong about a team? Were you fully wrong to be dismissive of the Lions and pick them as a 9-8 team? Is this a 12-plus win team in Detroit all of a sudden? Because I think it might be. And Jared Goff is playing the best football of his career. Not a poor man's Matt Ryan. Shout out to Ryan Fitzpatrick. Did you see that clip?
No.
Oh, you didn't. Your doppelganger, Ryan Fitzpatrick, got himself in some trouble. On the
Uh-oh.
pregame for the Lions game, Fitzpatrick made a comment saying that Goff was a poor man's Matt Ryan.
Oh, yeah, okay. I didn't see the clip, but I heard people talking about it.
And then Goff went on the post game and said, "I didn't think I was a poor man's anything out there tonight." And Fitzpatrick was like, "Oh, did you tell him, Whitworth?" And Whitworth's like, "I didn't send him the message." And Goff's like, "No, I saw it in the locker room." But he was cool about it. I liked it a lot. But yeah, Detroit played incredible in this game. I've had questions about the defense. I've had questions about the coach. I've had questions in general. I think they're probably a top 10 team in the NFL. I think they're probably the fourth best team in the NFC. And I guess I kind of just have to suck it up and be wrong.
Yeah, I feel like the Packers are not going to end up emerging from that division. I do think they have a shot, and there's been flashes from Love, but he's been inconsistent. Detroit's been really good. So I think Detroit's been a little better than I thought. Jordan Love hasn't been quite as good as I thought. And I mean, if I was making my pick today, I'd say that the Lions are going to win that division.
Yeah, that's certainly what it looks like right now.
Yeah. Okay, let's go on to the Sunday window. We had an early game in Jacksonville in London. It's basically a home game for Jacksonville, though. It seems like they play there every year. Jacksonville wins 23-7 over Atlanta. They outgained Atlanta 146 yards to 5 yards in the first quarter. Josh Allen recorded 3 sacks, including a game-ending strip sack. That's your boy. It always throws me when I have Josh Allen getting sacks in my notes, just for a second, if I'm talking about the quarterback getting sacked or the defensive end getting sacks. But Desmond Ridder threw interceptions on back-to-back passes in the second quarter, the first of which was a pick six. And Desmond Ridder's just atrocious. This is why you should have played him last year, so you could find out. Like, Bijan Robinson rushed for 105 yards on 14 carries, 48 rushing yards over expectation. He's the only player with 2 such games this season. If the Falcons want to make the playoffs, it's time to start Taylor Heinicke. Like, Ritter's done. Ritter's not an NFL quarterback. It's time to go to Taylor Heinicke. That's my take.
The Falcons not mortgaging their future for Lamar Jackson looks worse every single day. Desmond Ridder is he's terrible. He's not a backup quarterback, I don't think, let alone a starting quarterback. I think the Falcons are going to go into a free fall. For instance, I always, start previewing next week, but I know that they opened this week against the Texans as a 3-point favorite against the Texans in Atlanta. That has been bet down to being a pick'em now, which I think is probably closer to correct. But there is no scenario where Atlanta should be favored over Houston right now, in my opinion. I don't care if the game's played in Atlanta. I think that Atlanta is going to end up being one of the 5 to 7 worst teams in football. Having said all that, this is the exact type of performance you'd want to see out of Jacksonville. They at least handled business. Maybe the offense wasn't as explosive as you'd like it to be, but you handled business and you controlled the entire game. And I think Jacksonville is going to get back on track. And this is a big test this week for them coming with Buffalo. We're going to find out a lot about both of these teams.
Yeah, well, speaking of Buffalo, let's go to Buffalo, where the Buffalo Bills dethroned the greatest show on turf. They beat the Miami Dolphins 48-20. And, I mean, this game, Josh Allen just put on his cape, and he showed everybody who has the best offense in the NFL. He was 21-25, 320 yards and 4 touchdowns. He had a perfect passer rating as the Bills scored touchdowns on 4 of their first 5 possessions. And as much credit as Josh Allen deserves, Buffalo's defense also slowed Miami down. They've looked near unstoppable. They still got 393 yards, but the Bills were able to pressure Tua. They were able to take away the first read. And Miami only had 4 explosive passing plays. Now, a lot of teams would kill for 4 explosive passing plays in one game. That's a bad day in the office for an offense with Jalen Waddle and Tyreek Hill. Stephon Diggs had 6 catches for 112 yards and 3 touchdowns. The bad news for the Bills in this one is Tre'Davious White suffered an injury. It's feared to have been an Achilles injury. As of recording, I haven't heard confirmation on that, but usually when that stuff leaks out, that ends up being the case.
Yeah, the Bills own the Dolphins. I think we can say that pretty definitively. I think McDermott hasn't lost to Miami at home since he's been the coach of Buffalo. I think they're 9-1 in their last 10 against Miami. Um, but yeah, Buffalo has absolutely been the best team over the last 3 weeks. And then Tre'Davious White is just a gut punch. I mean, he's probably one of their top 10, maybe even fringe top 5 most important players on their team. They were about to get Von Miller back to what has been an elite defense. And then now you're getting Von Miller back, but you're subtracting Tre'Davious White, which I don't even know if that's a positive or a net positive for your defense. So Buffalo, that's a really, really brutal injury for them to have to deal with going forward, especially on a week they have to go to London to deal with Jacksonville.
Wait,
But
the Jags playing London back-to-back weeks?
yes, for the
Cool, I
first
didn't
time
realize
ever.
that. That's great. That seems like a huge advantage for Jacksonville.
So I've heard both ways. I actually meant to bring this up, and I got sidetracked on the Desmond Ritter stinking part of that game. Um, do you think it's an advantage for Jacksonville to not have to adjust, or is your week of practice going to be so weird and discombobulated that you're just going to be like ready to go home?
I think it's a huge advantage. I mean, you got grass, you can practice. It does I don't know why practice would be that big of an issue. I mean, I'd want to like sneak off and go see the sights, but these guys are millionaires. They can do that in the off season. So yeah, I feel like that'd be a huge advantage for Jacksonville to be there. Like we have the whole like West Coast team travels east thing. Like this is like East Coast team travels way east.
So does that mean you're taking Jags plus 5.5 against the Bills in London?
I don't know about that. I'll have to think about it. After what the Bills just did to the Dolphins, it's hard for me to bet against the Bills.
It feels like a good letdown spot, though. They got up for that game. Tre'Davious
That's
White's
true.
hurt. You have to go
And
to London now.
it really stinks for White as
It's
well
awful.
because late 2021 he tore his ACL, missed half of 2022, and now he comes into 2023 and ruptures the Achilles. One of the top corners in the league has had a terrible run of injuries.
Yeah, McDermott, when McDermott was giving a press conference about it, he sounded so despondent. Like he's like, this just, you want to think that there's a reason for everything, but you watch this guy work so hard year in and year out, and then this happens to him twice in such a short span. Yeah, it was like the most despondent I've ever heard a coach about an injury, really, that wasn't like life threatening. So, yeah, it's a shame. It's just terrible that Buffalo keeps having these brutal injuries, kind of derail their season. I feel like Von Miller last year, they were rolling early on, looked like the best defense in football, and then Von Miller went out for the year. Now I feel like you're getting the same thing here with Tre'Davious just when you were about to get Von back.
Yeah. Well, one fun fact from this game, fun little stat. You know I like to pull these out, but teams coming off of 50-plus point victories.
Yes,
1970. Yes. I don't know if you've seen this one or not.
Mm-hmm.
This is also from NFL Research. Are now 7-6, so just barely have a winning record.
Well, I thought you were going to go the other way. I'm pretty sure I could be off on this. I'm pretty sure now that teams scoring 60+ are 1-6 against the spread and 0-7 straight up the following week.
Yeah, I hadn't seen that one.
I could be wrong, but I thought I saw that before this week. So, yeah, it doesn't seem like sometimes you make the joke like you save those points for next week. Maybe that's true. And I did say, like, going into the game, the Bills beat the Commanders by 34. The Dolphins beat the Broncos by 50. Is it really that different?
Yeah, not really. One's more fun to talk about.
Yeah, or I meant the Dolphins beat the Broncos. I don't know if I said that correctly.
I think that's
that's what I meant. Yeah.
All right, well, let's go on to Carolina, where the Minnesota Vikings beat the Panthers 21-13. Carolina took a 13-7 lead into halftime, but the Minnesota defense shut out Carolina in the second half, and they helped their own cause with a fumble 6 to take the lead in this one. So, Minnesota's defense wins this game more so than the offense. Kirk Cousins threw a 99-yard pick 6 to Sam Franklin in the first half to spoil What was a really good opening drive for the Vikings. This also coming one play after a holding penalty negated a touchdown to Justin Jefferson. So a little bit of miscues there. Vikings having a hard time getting out of their own way, but they do pick up the win over Carolina. My big thing from this game is it's just so hard to evaluate Bryce Young. I've got a buddy that's a Panthers fan, and he's real down on the Panthers and asked me why Bryce Young isn't any good. And I'm like, well, I mean, he's constantly under pressure. They don't have weapons. Like I thought he flashed accuracy in this game when he had time to throw. It's just not often enough. The Panthers, I thought with the coaching staff they put together and drafting Bryce Young, they could push to win this division. It turns out the defense isn't as good as we thought. It turns out the offensive line's not as good as we thought, and none of the dart throws at wide receiver worked. And so I still think Bryce Young can be a good quarterback. I just think there's not much going on around him to help out right now.
Reich might be washed too. You look at what Reich was doing last year, and he had bad quarterback play, but he's lost. I think he's like 2-15 in his last 17 games or something crazy now as a head coach. But Carolina has no surrounding talent around Bryce Young. It's hard to evaluate what Bryce Young is doing. But there's 2 points to take away from what the stat I'm about to give. But Miles Sanders had 13 carries for 19 yards in this game against a defense that DeAndre Swift rushed for 1 billion yards against. Like, there's obviously 2 points to make there, which is one, situations are different. Carolina's offensive line is not Philadelphia's offensive line. So obviously those are way different situations, way different. It's not an easy comparison to make. But DeAndre Swift is so much more dynamic than Miles Sanders ever was. That's another just something I wanted to throw out there as a little jab, since as you know, I was never a big Miles guy, and I am a big Swift guy. So I think that Carolina just doesn't have any surrounding talent around Bryce. I thought Miles would be at least an average running back to have with him, and Thielen would step up to be an average receiver, and maybe one of the dart throws at receiver like Shark or Mingo or Marshall or one of the guys that they had could step up. But the offensive line, as referenced by that rushing stat and by reference by Bryce Young's pressure stats, the offensive line is disqualifying this team from even being competent. And the Bears, while you can't feel good about the decisions you've made, especially in your trade down, and you can't feel good about where you're at as a franchise, you do have the first and second pick as of right now with your own pick and with Carolina's pick if you're the Chicago Bears.
Yeah, well, and that's the game that we're getting here.
Perfect.
Getting to next here, you're really good at doing that. Just leading us into the. I'm not even shuffling these around in my notes. This is the very next game. So we got Denver at Chicago, and Denver wins this game 31-28. Chicago jumped out to a 28-7 lead in the late third quarter, and the headlines: Sean Payton can't hack it, were ready to be printed.
Ooh.
It was great. I was going to do a Photoshop thing of a magazine cover. And then what does Denver do? They claw back in. They get a fumble 6, tie the game at 28. And then after a fourth down stop, Russell Wilson throws a 48-yard pass to my guy Marvin Mims to set up a go-ahead field goal. Now, I thought there's things you can be encouraged by offensively in this game if you're the Bears. Justin Fields looked good. 6 explosive passing plays in the first half. He threw for 335 yards on 80% completion with 4 touchdowns. I mean, his scoop and score fumble really hurt, but he threw the ball well. Although I do think that's more of an indictment of the Broncos defense that just gave up 70 points to the Dolphins than it really is a cause for celebration for Chicago. I mean, wide receivers were open everywhere. There was no pressure on Fields. Like, at the end of the day, I just think these are 2 of the worst teams in the NFL.
I don't have much to say on this game. My biggest takeaway from this game, I remember we had a clip that you put out that we were both laughing about at the end of last year or this offseason, where I said Matt Eberflus is either an absolute moron who should not be a head coach, or he's orchestrating the most ambitious tanking job of all time by making sure he loses close games last year. Turns out he's a moron. It turns out we have that answer. I think he's a terrible head coach. I don't think he's cut to be a head coach at all. That defense is awful, and that's all he's doing. The game management decisions are terrible. They're a poorly run organization. Their defensive coordinator's like arrested or whatever's going on there. Chase Claypool got sent home, and then they had to like put out a media release to clean up what their head coach said about it. The Bears are just an absolute catastrophe from the front office, the ownership, the locker room drama, the coaching staff, everything that you can mess up with an organization, the Bears have messed up in that organization. But like I said, at least you have right now the top 2 picks in an absolutely loaded draft class. Yeah, and then there should be like a flush noise after that, like flush. Like that's what this bowl was. It was the ultimate toilet bowl.
Yeah. I did think so. 2 weeks ago, I canceled the Chargers, and then they won their first game of the year. Last week, I canceled the Bears, and I thought the Bears were about to go win their game and make teams I canceled 2-0 following the week in which I canceled them. But fortunately, Eberflus got in the way, and that didn't happen. So my streak can end at 1.
If that would have happened, we would have had to make you cancel the Eagles every week.
Yeah, I don't know. But at that point, I'm not sure if that works. It might only work for previously winless teams. I don't know.
Yeah.
Okay, let's move on to the Baltimore Ravens at the Cleveland Browns. The Baltimore Ravens win this game 28-3. Not to say Deshaun Watson's been playing well, because he certainly hasn't, but him being out and DTR starting in his place kind of robbed us of what I thought could have been a really good game. Not to take anything away from Lamar and the Baltimore offense that played really well. I said last week, this is the least yards allowed through 3 games this century by the Cleveland Browns. Lamar Jackson ended with the same number of touchdowns as he did incompletions, 4. He was 8 of 9 for 136 yards and a touchdown when under pressure. He was in full command of this offense. And the Ravens now have a 1-game lead in a division that we said was really tough. They've got a 1-game lead, and they've done it while missing a staggering number of starters. We'll get to the Bengals in a little bit. I think they're done. I don't even think they're going to make the playoffs. The Browns, the Steelers are a catastrophe. And then you've got the Browns, who their defense is really good, but that offense, I just think it's untenable. I think Baltimore's an easy favorite to win this division 4 weeks in.
Yeah, I was actually thinking while I was driving home from work today about placing a future on Baltimore to either win the Super Bowl or AFC because of the reasons you just laid out. They are absolutely in the driver's seat of their division right now. Pittsburgh, I think, is probably going to finish better than people are expecting. After week 1, people wrote them off. They won 2 straight.
They didn't write back.
Yeah, they didn't write back. Exactly. I do think they'll probably respond and get back to like 4-4, and they'll probably be an 8-9 win team. But their upside is limited. Cleveland's upside is very limited, in my opinion, by their offense. And then you have Cincinnati. I thought they'd bounce back this week, and they didn't. So who knows what's going to happen with them. At this point, you can definitely say it's fair to question if they can bounce back from this and if Joe Burrow will ever be healthy Joe Burrow this year. But Baltimore looks like a complete team with a ton of guys hurt. And the best part about those people being hurt is that none of them are hurt for the year or anything. They're getting most, besides Dobbins. Dobbins was a tough injury that they're going to have to deal with all year. Besides that, all their other injuries, from what I have gathered, are guys who will be back in the coming weeks. And maybe that means you're getting experience for your depth pieces, and that way you're ready for any situation come playoff time. But I think the Ravens are a legitimate title contender. The only thing I'd like to see them do, and I hate to harp on the running back position because you know that I don't think it matters all that much, but it just feels like their running back situation's untenable. It feels like they need to go get a real running back that's not Melvin Gordon or Gus Edwards or Justice Hill. I don't know who that is. I don't know if it's making a splash trade for like a Jonathan Taylor or doing something like that, or if it's just going and getting whatever the Cam Akers equivalent is that becomes available at the deadline, or signing someone off the street. But they have to do something to get Lamar a consistent option in the backfield, in my opinion. But outside of that, I think the Ravens have impressed me a ton with a ton of guys hurt.
Yeah, absolutely. They've looked really good, and there wasn't really a ramp up period to getting the Todd Monken offense working like we thought there might be. And so I'm full steam ahead with Baltimore.
Yeah, it wasn't great last week against Indy. They had a tough game offensively, really mainly because they couldn't run the ball at all in that game, which I think comes down less to Todd Monken's scheme and comes down more to just not having a dynamic running back.
Right.
But I will say, I have a trivia question for you. How many games do you think Lamar has had in his career where he's had 2 touchdowns or 2+ touchdowns passing and 2+ touchdowns rushing?
I think I saw this, and the answer is 2. Is that right?
This was the first one.
Oh, it was the first one. Okay.
Isn't that shocking?
That is, yeah. I remember I saw that. I thought I saw it was the second time, but yeah, you would think that had happened before, but
the surprising part of it, that when I looked it up after I saw it, he doesn't score that many touchdowns rushing, as many as you'd think, because I think we're used to the tush push, and we're used to Jalen. I don't even know how many touchdowns he had last year. I think 13, 14 in the regular season, and then 5 or 6 in the playoffs. But Lamar doesn't get that amount of touchdown production from a rushing perspective.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's go on to a surprising team so far. It's the Houston Texans. They played host to the Pittsburgh Steelers, and they weren't a very good host because they just kind of beat them up all over the field. They won this game 30-6. CJ Stroud shredded the Steelers defense. Now, his completion percentage isn't great if you're looking at the box score, 16 of 30, but he threw for 306 yards and took no sacks playing behind a high school offensive line. Against TJ Watt and Alex Highsmith. Like, I had money on TJ Watt to get 2 sacks in this game. I mean, it was pretty plus odds, but I thought they would tear them up. No sacks. Nico Collins had 7 catches for 168 yards and 2 touchdowns. Stroud posted his 3rd straight game of 250-plus passing yards, 2+ touchdowns, and no interceptions. That's the longest streak by any rookie since 1970, at least. It could be further. That's as far as NFL research went back. That's just insane stuff from CJ Stroud. We were talking about off air. Will Anderson's been very good as well. Like, as much as we buried the Texans for what they did in the draft, and I still don't think it's wise to give up what they gave up to go get Will Anderson, the Texans might have killed that draft. Like, both of these guys look legit. And regardless of what you give up, if you come out of it with a franchise edge rusher and a franchise quarterback, you didn't overpay. So Texans look really good. The Steelers look like a disaster. Kenny Pickett left the game with a knee injury. He was 15 of 23 for 114 yards and an interception before that happened. Matt Canada is a total joke, a moron. And, I mean, the Steelers will end up with 8 wins because it's Mike Tomlin and that's what they do, but they're not a serious football team until they get an offensive coordinator.
Since the start of 2021, the Pittsburgh Steelers are – so I guess I should preface this by saying since the start of 2021, the average amount of points scored in an NFL game by team in the NFL is 22.5. In games that the Steelers have allowed 22 or less, they are 19-3-1. In games that they allow 23 or more, they are 1-15. That is astounding. Like, I saw this one thread of a Steelers guy that I follow of just like all these stats that'll melt your brain about 3rd down stats about the offense, 4th quarter stats about the offense. Kenny Pickett stats this year compared to last year, especially like the end of last year compared to what he's been so far this year. There are stats that will just blow your mind about like how is Matt Canada making probably like upwards of $1 million to do his job this year this poorly.
He's literally never had a 400-yard offensive performance.
Yeah. There's some like he's never had a top blank offense. Like it's amazing that he was hired to do this job, and it's even more amazing that he hasn't been fired from this job.
Yeah, I agree 100%. All right,
but I did realize that I didn't comment on Stroud at all. Incredible. He's looked nothing short of amazing. I can't remember the last time a rookie looked this good right off the bat. You'd have to remind me, like, when's the last time we had a really good rookie quarterback?
Um,
Baker.
I'd have to think on that. Yeah.
Like, Baker played really well his second half of the year. Herbert played really well, but they went like 4-12. Yeah, I can't think of one. Burrow got hurt pretty fast.
It's too far back, but I mean, I remember Ben Roethlisberger had a really good rookie. That's a long time ago. Cam Newton had a really good.
Yeah, Cam for sure.
RG3, but I mean, those are still all way back. I'm not thinking of anything that's really recent.
That's what I'm saying. Like Cam and RG3 had amazing rookie years. Dak had an amazing rookie year. I guess that's 2016, so that's not that long ago.
Yeah, and I mean, Herbert was really good. The team wasn't. Didn't Gardner Minshew play really well as a rookie too?
Yeah, statistically probably. Yeah, he was definitely pretty good that year. But I would say, I mean, Stroud has impressed me as much as any rookie that we're looking at it, as much as any rookie we can remember since Dak in 2016. And I think the Texans, and I want to go back and listen to some of our AFC South preview content in the offseason, because I said a lot that I think, we always see a team that gets the first year head coach bump. And a lot of times it coincides with having a young quarterback. And I thought the Texans could be that team. It turns out the Colts could be that team as well. But the Texans really could be that team. D'Amico Ryans has that defense playing a lot better football. CJ Stroud looks great in what is like a Shanahan disciple offense with Bobby Slowick as the offensive coordinator. I wouldn't be surprised, by the way, to see him be a hot name in head coaching circles this offseason. It's early. What he's done with a rookie quarterback in CJ Stroud can't be ignored. And he's a Shanahan disciple, so people will love that. So I wouldn't be surprised if Bobby Slowick is a name that you hear. So let's play a fun game. I guess we've talked about 2 of the 4, so maybe it's burying the lead to talk about it now. Let me know after I propose it. There are 4 2-2 AFC South teams. How would you rank them in terms of their likelihood to win the AFC South at this point?
Jaguars, Texans, Colts, Titans.
I think I agree.
I could be swayed. Colts, Texans is close for me.
Colts, Titans is close for me.
As that one's not particularly close for me. I'm just not impressed by the Titans. I don't trust the Titans. I know they just beat up on Cincinnati. They'll probably get blown out by somebody next week. That's what they've done so far this year. But Colts. Colts are tough. Anthony Richardson's been dynamic. He's also been banged up. I think I would give Houston a slight edge there, but Jacksonville's still far and away my number 1.
Yeah, I agree with the Jacksonville point. It really comes down to Houston, Indy, and Tennessee and how you rank it. But Houston's second for me, and I wouldn't be shocked if they compete for a wild card.
Yeah. All right. Let's move on to Indianapolis. You did it again, where the Los Angeles Rams beat the Colts 29-23 in overtime. Was this the Colts' second straight overtime game? They did overtime against Baltimore last week, right?
Yeah, they did.
Yeah, second straight overtime game. The Rams jumped out to a 23-0 lead before giving up 23 unanswered points and finding themselves in overtime. Enter the man of the hour, Puka Nacua. Started overtime with a 20-yard reception, capped that drive with a touchdown reception. He finished with 9 catches for 163 yards and a touchdown. Through 4 weeks in the National Football League, Puka Nacua has 39 receptions. Mark, how many receptions do you think he had his final year of college?
How many?
48. It's insane. What's going on there with him and Matthew Stafford and their connection is just insane. But there were special teams miscues on both sides in this game. Indy missed a field goal. The Rams missed 2 field goals. Anthony Richardson started slow, but he really came alive in the second half. Led 3 touchdown drives, 2 successful 2-point conversions to tie the game. Ultimately, they couldn't get it done in overtime, though.
I just thought of a joke in my head, and I feel like there's a good chance it's been made already online. But let me know. Pokemon, got to catch them all. I feel like there's something there with a shirt. You make
I
a
like
shirt,
it.
you got Pikachu, you put Puka's head on it, got to catch them all, something like that. I don't know. That came
Catching
out of my head.
Pokeball. Yeah, I like
39
it.
catches
I
in
have
4
not heard
games,
it. I
though.
like it.
39 catches in 4 games. The prior record for a rookie in their first 4 games was 30 catches, and it was by Anquan Bolden. So that's a record that stood for like almost 20 years. So what Puka's done is incredible, and it makes you think, was Cooper Kupp a system receiver? Like, we put him in that like top receiver conversation because he put up historic numbers, but would Puka Nacua have just done that, or is Puka Nacua also just elite? And now the Rams are going to be sick when they get Cooper Kupp back coming in the coming weeks, maybe this week.
Yeah, what if they're both just like once in a lifetime receivers and neither of them gets credit because of the existence of the other one?
Yeah, that might be what happens. And it's a shame. I know that I have Puka Nacua in a lot of fantasy leagues. I think there's a lot of people out there who aren't that plugged in to what's going on with Cooper Kupp, and they think like, oh my God, I have this wide receiver 1, like this guy who's going to just keep being like a top 5, top 10 receiver for the rest of the year. And I do feel like Cooper Kupp coming back, like, I don't know what the analogy is, but like Matthew Stafford has this like new girlfriend who he's been buying like a ton of flowers and like chocolate for, and then his like famous ex-girlfriend moved back into town, and I think his attention is going to be towards Cooper Kupp then.
What?
Instead of Puka. That analogy kind of fell through, but I stand behind it, and I think Cooper Kupp might end up eating away at Puka Doncic's his target share.
I do love when you start doing analogies and you're not sure where they're going to end up. It's one of my favorite things on this show.
Yeah, I try to do it. I try to do it once a week.
All right, we've got 6 games left here. Let's keep rolling on with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and the New Orleans Saints. Tampa Bay beats the Saints 26-9. Baker Mayfield went 25 of 32 for 246 yards and 3 touchdowns. He put an end to the Saints' record of 21 straight games of allowing under 20 points. And he did throw a pick in the red zone, but the Bucs defense bailed him out and forced a fumble on the very next play. As for the Saints, everything was a struggle. Their longest play of the day was 20 yards. Derek Carr was 23 of 37 for 127 yards. He attempted 14 passes behind the line of scrimmage, which is tied for the most in his career. I think it's fair to wonder if that shoulder injury was still bothering him this week.
Yeah,
looks like I might have lost. Okay,
can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I got you now.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
My bad. Did you reveal that Alvin Kamara had 13 catches for 33 yards in this game?
Well, I said that Carr attempted 14 passes behind the line of scrimmage, which is the most in his career.
Yeah. So
I'm wondering if the shoulder injury was still bothering him this week.
Yeah, I think it was, but those stats go hand in hand. But 13 catches for 33 yards is one of the funniest stat lines I've ever seen in my life. Like, that's just
I would be furious if I played against Alvin Kamara in a PPR league.
Oh, yeah. It's actually funny that you said that. Someone told me about that. Like, oh, Kamara came back for me and killed it. I was like, I watched that game. He did not kill it. I was like, what? And he showed me. I was like, oh, he did have a ton of catches. I didn't even think about it. But, yeah, the Saints are not fun to watch play football. It's that simple. I was excited for a potential Jameis Winston revenge game against Tampa Bay. And then you robbed the people of Jameis and you gave him, Derek Carr with enough padding to be the Michelin man. And he clearly had no ability to make anything happen.
Bayou Kirk Cousins.
Yeah, exactly.
I used to call him West Coast Kirk Cousins. I've got to change it now, but Bayou Kirk Cousins, that still works.
Yeah, I miss Jameis Winston. That's what it comes down to for me.
All right, let's go to Tennessee. We alluded to this game earlier. Cincinnati gets beat by Tennessee 27-3. The Titans and Bengals traded field goals on their opening drives, which spanned the entire first quarter. 2 drives the whole first quarter. Then after trading punts, Cincy punting twice, Tennessee once. Tennessee scored touchdowns on 3 straight possessions to take a 24-3 halftime lead. Ryan Tannehill threw for 240 yards and a touchdown with an interception. Derrick Henry had 122 rushing yards. After their opening drive, Cincinnati punted on 5 of their remaining 7 possessions. The other 2 were a fumble and a failed fourth down attempt. Joe Burrow completed 66% of his passes, 20 of 30 for 165 yards. I mean, he's a shadow of himself right now. And the Bengals are not built like the 49ers or like the Eagles to sustain their quarterback struggling. He is their entire team. And as long as he's a shadow of himself, the Bengals are not a threat. I think the Bengals are going to miss the playoffs. And hindsight's 2020. I think they mishandled the Joe Burrow thing. I think you probably should have sat him the first few weeks and got the calf right. Obviously, I don't know what's going on there, but it's obviously still bothering him. We've seen him tweak it in games, and I think their season is lost now.
Yeah, I feel like, I hate to say, like, let's move on to the next game. You said anything that I would have. Like, I think the Bengals season, if I were to guess, is probably over. I think it's probably too hard to recover in a really tough AFC. I don't know if Joe Burrow will be able to just snap his fingers and be healthy at any point at this point. Like, they're not going to sit him down. So I don't think he's going to get healthy continuing to play. I think he should have been shut down immediately when that injury happened. And I totally agree with you. So it's hard to add anything. Tennessee, you have to give them credit. Vrabel, just every time you count them out and you think that, it's finally done. They were 1-2. They're an underdog. Back against the wall, and they smoke Cincinnati. They played FU football. They had Jeffrey Simmons come in as a fullback a couple times. They had Derrick Henry take some direct snaps at different points of the game. Like, they just played man football in this game, and they outmanned Cincinnati. And I guess the positive takeaway, if you're out on Cincinnati and you think Cincinnati stinks, this is an Eagles standpoint thing. The Cincinnati Bengals were able to, like, out-tough the Rams on Monday Night Football and win a game 19-16. And we're able to control the pace of the game and can kind of control the game. The Eagles are in a lot better shape than the Bengals, regardless of our concerns about their struggles. So the hope is, at the very worst, hopefully the Eagles can do that against the Rams. Just a thought I had when I was kind of studying the Eagles-Rams matchup.
Yeah. One more note on this game. Derrick Henry recorded his 35th 100-yard rushing game for the Titans. He trails Eddie George by 1 game and Earl Campbell by 4 games for the franchise record. So 5 more 100-yard games for Derrick Henry this year. He will break that record, which is kind of cool to see.
His passing stats are historic too, I'm pretty sure.
I don't know about that. What?
He threw a touchdown in this game, right? Am I incorrect?
I'm honestly not sure. I'd have to go look it up again.
I think he did. I'm pretty sure Derrick Henry threw a touchdown in this game.
Okay. I didn't write it down if he did. I'm gonna go look now though. So I have the people have to know. My
research skills are limited, but I'm pretty sure he
did.
And I'm pretty sure
1 of 1 for 2 yards and a touchdown. Didn't even give the guy a perfect passer rating. 118.8 passer rating.
How does that work?
It's just not enough yards to get up there.
Yeah, that's funny. That is funny. But he, I'm pretty sure that I saw some stat, like, if you started your career the way Derrick Henry's, like, passing career is, like, you'd have the best start of your career in NFL history. Like, yeah, it's through however many attempts he has. I could be wrong, but I saw some crazy stat about it. Maybe that was just in the red zone or something. I saw some crazy stat about Henry.
Okay, I'm going to have to try to look that one up at some point too.
But, yeah. Maybe I'll tweet it out from the account.
Yeah, okay. Let's move into the Sunday afternoon slate. We've got the Las Vegas Raiders at the Los Angeles Chargers. The Chargers win 24-17. They had a 24-7 halftime lead. Justin Herbert sailed a deep ball in the third quarter for an interception that really opened the door for the Raiders to come back. The Raiders, who were starting a rookie quarterback in Aiden O'Connell instead of Jimmy G, he struggled. He fumbled twice in the second quarter. He was sacked 7 times, threw an interception. Khalil Mack recorded 6 sacks in this game.
Oof.
1 sack shy of tying the single game record of 7. Khalil Mack hasn't had a double-digit sack season since 2018, but he had 6 in this game. he also had none through the first 3 weeks. So he needs to find 4 more to get back into double-digit territory.
Yeah, this game was on drugs. Like, every Chargers game is on drugs, but this one was insane. Like you said, the Chargers didn't score a point in the second half, and just, normally that would cause me to come in and yell and scream about Justin Herbert. Justin Herbert did mess up his finger in this game and had like gauze on it, and then they had a glove on it. And Chargers medical staff, that crack team, seemed to like not be able to figure it out. He had like a different contraption every time he came out, like a splint and all these different things that they had for him, and he wasn't able to figure it out. He did have like a funny post game where he referenced Monty Python and said it was just a flesh wound, and then they said, "Was it actually?" And he said, "No, I'm just quoting a movie." But it was, I thought it was pretty funny. But yeah, the Chargers tried to lose this game. It feels like, that's just what they do. And at one point, the Raiders had 1st and goal, down 7. To potentially win this game. This is not an important takeaway. There's probably a lot more important things I could say about this game than what I'm about to. Josh McDaniels got saved from one of the all-time stupid blunder decisions in coaching history. There was like one of the more clear, and this is bad officiating too, but one of the more clear touchdowns I've ever seen. Devontae Adams caught like 2 yards into the end zone and got tackled out of the end zone onto the 1 yard line, and the ref somehow ruled him down on the 1. And instead of challenging it, which was like a very clear win challenge, or what would have been a winnable challenge, Josh McDaniels had them sprint to the line and run a QB sneak that didn't work. And they ended up getting in on like 3rd and goal. But if they didn't score there, in my opinion, Josh McDaniels should have been fired on the spot. And maybe he still should be, but that was one of the more egregious coaching, mistakes I've ever seen in a game. Honestly,
well, I mean, to be fair, he never should have been hired. He should have been fired last year.
Yeah,
we could enumerate the times he should have been fired, but yeah, the Justin Herbert thing. I just picture like the medical staff going up to Brandon Staley and be like, "It just so happens that your quarterback is only mostly dead." There's a big difference between being mostly dead and all dead. Mostly dead means he's still alive. That's kind of what runs through my head with the whole Justin Herbert thing. But to bring it back to your Derrick Henry point, though, Derrick Henry's career passing stats. He has started 106 games. He has 6 completions on 7 attempts for 85% completion percentage for 25 yards and 3 touchdowns. 121 passer rating.
Yeah, I saw something. There's something there. If you had that start, maybe the best first 6 passes or something. I don't know what the stat is, but yeah, Derrick Henry, make him your quarterback. Maybe that's the answer. Someone needs to just give Derrick Henry all the money and make him their quarterback.
Let Derrick Henry cook.
If you gave the ball to Derrick Henry 60 times, maybe it would work. Like he'd figure out a way to, he'd pass it a couple times.
He'd probably throw like 60 passes. He'd probably throw like 45 touchdowns if the stats bear out.
Easily.
All right. Well, if we're talking about Derrick Henry throwing touchdowns, it's probably time to move on to the next game, which is the New England Patriots at the Dallas Cowboys. And after a disappointing performance against the Cardinals, the Cowboys roared back this week, winning 38-3. They only allowed 2.3 yards per carry. They forced 3 Mac Jones turnovers, including a pick 6 and a fumble 6. After the opening field goal drive for New England, Dallas allowed only 6 first downs on the next 7 drives. And I just realized New England and Cincinnati both opened the game with field goals and never scored again. Mac Jones was benched for Bailey Zappi in the late 3rd quarter. After the game, when asked about it, Bill Belichick said he didn't see any point in leaving him out there at that point and that he is still the starting quarterback. On the Cowboys side, they still, you're not going to complain about things in a 38-3 win, but they still struggled in the red zone. They started 0 of 3 in the red zone. They're 7 of 19 through 4 weeks in the red zone. And that's going to matter probably against teams that aren't the Patriots, but it didn't matter against the Patriots. And this is the largest margin of defeat in Bill Belichick's career as the Patriots continue to struggle this year.
Yeah, I don't have anything here on the Cowboys. What I will just say is, like, I think Mac Jones is the perfect backup quarterback. Like, I think he's going to be just your quintessential backup quarterback. He does not have it to be the starter. He makes too many bad decisions. But we have seen enough. Like, how do you justify the Patriots winning 11 games a few years ago and making the playoffs and almost winning that division over Buffalo? Like, how did that happen with Mac Jones in his rookie year? I just don't understand how that occurred because everything that's happened since it doesn't make any sense.
That's another one of those good rookie years. Mac Jones had a pretty good rookie season.
Yeah, he did. I wouldn't say he was even close to as impressive as Stroud has been, though.
No, not at all.
Yeah, so that's the one thing I'll say about it. But successful-wise, they were definitely successful in his rookie season. Yeah, the Patriots very clearly should tank and should try to get one of these prospects that are at the top of the draft. The question is, would they let Belichick stay around to pick him and stay around to develop him? Or is this going to be the last year of Belichick?
Bye-bye.
Yeah, it might be.
I would be happy to leave Belichick around as the coach, but him being the GM is a non-starter for me. Like, if I'm Robert Kraft, I sit down with Bill Belichick and say, I'm hiring a GM. I'd love for you to stay and coach, but the GM is non-negotiable, and he will make all personnel decisions.
That's probably the decision to make.
Yeah. Also, the Falcons should go trade for Mac Jones. They'd make it to the playoffs.
I don't know if I agree with that. I don't think I agree with that.
No?
I think Tampa would still be a little better. I think Tampa's going to win that division. Am I insane?
No, I mean, they've looked good through 4 weeks.
Yeah, I guess they looked horrible against us, but yeah, I just don't think it. I think Atlanta's got more issues than just quarterback, but Mac Jones is better than Ritter, a lot better than Ritter, but I don't think he's that much better than Ritter.
Yeah, I think he's light years ahead of Ritter, but
yeah, it's fair. It's fair.
So are 31 other starting quarterbacks in the NFL.
Yeah.
So. Okay, let's move on to Arizona at San Francisco. San Francisco wins 34-16. They jumped out to a quick 21-3 lead. Arizona cut it to a 5-point lead, but they just had no answer for Christian McCaffrey and Brandon Ayuk. Christian McCaffrey scored the 49ers' first 4 touchdowns. He had 177 total yards from scrimmage. Brandon Ayuk had 6 receptions for 148 yards. On a day where George Kittle and Deebo Samuel combined for 1 catch, San Francisco still had almost 400 yards. And that's why this 49ers offense is so good. So many playmakers, such a good scheme. 1 guy, 2 guys can have an off game, and it just doesn't matter. They've got enough weapons, enough talent to go around. On Arizona's side, Arizona's feisty. I mean, they could have folded, and they didn't. They battled back and made it a 5-point game. They went for it on a 4th and 7 from near midfield, ran a fake punt from their own 21-yard line. Arizona's not the dumpster fire that I thought they would be. San Francisco is on fire, though.
Yeah, they're the best team in football so far. They haven't played any good teams, but they have a big one coming this week against Dallas, coming to San Fran. In my opinion, I think San Fran will probably lay a beat down. But this is a big measuring stick to see, are they truly this dominant team that we're all crowning them as? I think they probably are. Brock Purdy's never lost the game. He started and finished. I guess the natural conversation to have is, can Christian McCaffrey win MVP in your opinion?
I think he could, but it's going to have to be something crazy because MVP is just a quarterback award. The last time a non-QB won the award, they set a record, a single-season record. So I think it probably takes that.
Yeah, I think Mahomes, Allen, and Hurts are all too good to allow it to happen. All of them will be on really good teams. Mm-hmm. I think Tua I would probably still take Tua over Christian McCaffrey in terms of who I would bet first. I think the injury factor with McCaffrey is also important to note. It seems like everyone's coming out and saying bet his MVP this week because they haven't bumped it up as much as you'd think they would. And I think that's because of the injuries in part. Not that the quarterbacks can't get hurt as well, but McCaffrey has a history.
Yeah, I mean, if you talk right now, he's on pace for 1,951 rushing yards and 26 rushing touchdowns. He's on pace for 600 receiving yards and 4 touchdowns. So, I mean, if you're telling me he's going to have 2,500 all-purpose yards and 30 touchdowns, then yeah, I think he probably wins the MVP if he's able to do that.
Yeah. I don't think he'll do that, but yeah.
No, I don't. To be clear, I don't either. Yeah.
Agreed there.
All right, let's move on to our last game because, again, we are recording during Monday Night Football, and so we won't be talking Seattle, New York Giants. But we'll talk Kansas City Chiefs at the Jets. And this game, again, I feel like I've said this a lot this week. Kansas City jumped out to a quick lead, 17-0 in the first quarter, and then the wheels came off. Mahomes threw 2 picks. Juwan Taylor was called for a face mask that led to a safety. They were ultimately able to pull it back with a 14-play field goal drive to take the lead at the end and win 23-20. But the Chiefs did not dominate this game. And Zach Wilson, to his credit, he played the best game that he's played this year. At moments, he looked good, but it wasn't enough. And on his final play of the game, he fumbled the ball back to KC, and they were able to close the game out. Andy Reid, with this win, became the 5th NFL coach to win 250 regular season games as the Chiefs improved to 3-1.
Yeah, I think the Chiefs. People are making much ado about nothing with the them collapsing in the second half and barely winning, and Mahomes throwing a couple picks. I just don't think that there's anything to worry about with Kansas City. What I would say, I guess the conversation that I want to move towards, what did you think of the Sauce Gardner holding penalty?
I didn't like it. I don't really like that call. But I can see how you throw the flag. It's kind of one of those, I would rather you let them play there. It seemed like to me, he's got inside leverage on the receiver. The receiver is trying to run an in-breaking route, and they collide, and Sauce Gardner's hands are definitely on the receiver when they collide. And I thought he let go. I didn't think he grabbed on. I wouldn't have thrown a flag. If I was a Jets fan, I would be pretty livid that they threw a flag. But I can see where the call came from.
Yeah, I thought that, if we're going to get nuts about calls, I think there's 100 worse calls every Sunday than that. Yeah. That's the only thing that I would say. And I feel like there was a ton of outrage. I think this happens against the Chiefs a lot. But, yeah, that's all I wanted to say. I think it looked like a lot of holding calls that get called. And I thought that there was a lot of outrage for it. And, would I have cared if they didn't call it? No. But I do think the outrage was phony. That's my take on that. But Chiefs are fine. If anything, my takeaway from this game is not about Mahomes and the offense struggling. My takeaway is, maybe the Chiefs defense isn't quite as good as I thought it could be, because I thought that the Chiefs defense looked top 5 through a couple weeks, but allowing Zach Wilson to do that is slightly concerning with how bad Zach Wilson's been in his career. So that's, if anything's the takeaway, it's probably that.
Yeah. All right. Monday Night Football update here. Geno Smith is in the medical tent with an apparent high ankle sprain. So,
yeah, I saw that.
And also Jamal Adams, in his first game back after being injured for 7 years, got injured and left the game again. So that trade, man, that was a brutal. But we won't know the outcome. It is 7-3 closing in on halftime here at that game as we're going to sign off here. So let's get into our final thoughts. For my final thought, I'm going to continue the tradition of canceling a team. I have already canceled the Chargers until they fire Brandon Staley. I've canceled the Bears. Today I'm canceling the Atlanta Falcons. 2 straight blowout losses in which Desmond Ridder has looked hopeless. Taylor Heinicke is on your bench. He's on your bench for this reason. I am canceling the Falcons. I reserve the right not to care about them until they start an actual NFL quarterback. I may uncancel them if they decide to bring Taylor Heinicke out, but until such a time as they do, the Falcons are canceled.
My final thought, my 2 weekly auto bets, which are Jalen Hurts anytime touchdown and Jake Moody, the 49ers kicker, over 7.5 points, did not cash this week. Do you know what that means, Shane?
Double down this week.
Double down this week. It's not going to happen 2 times in a row. You look at the numbers behind those plays, and they suggest that you play it for the next 5 weeks, even if they fail to do it the next 5 weeks. So just keep doubling down. I trust the data is what I'd say. That's my final thought.
Can I interest you in another automatic kicker related bet?
I thought you were going to say automatic anytime touchdown and throw Anthony Richardson at me, but what's your kicker bet?
Jake Elliott over 1.5 field goals. They keep setting the line at 1.5, and the Eagles keep struggling in the red zone. And by the way, you don't even have to get to the red zone, get to the 45, and it's pretty much automatic. So Jake Elliott over 1.5 field goals is one that I've hit each of the last 2 weeks.
Yeah, that's a good bet this year. The funny thing about that is in the past, Sirianni was so aggressive on fourth down and limited his field goal attempts, but he's had a ton this year.
Now, I will say it was all the way down at like minus 158 this last week. Mm-hmm. So it's not very good odds on that one, but it's cash. So, all right. Well, that is going to do it. Thank you for joining us for episode number 125 of Chalk Talk. Thanks to Miss Chris in the comments, to Clutch City with the donation coming in clutch there. We really appreciate you guys joining the show. We will hopefully be back in our normal time slot next week. Hopefully we won't have any scheduling conflicts. But if you're enjoying what you hear on this show, be sure you smash that subscribe button, turn on notifications so you don't miss our next episode, no matter when it goes live. Drop us a 5-star rating and review if you're listening on an audio podcasting platform. You can follow me on Twitter and YouTube at ShaneHalfNFL. You can follow Mark on Twitter at Mark Henry Jr. We will catch you guys next time.